The significant contributions of black soldiers during both world wars are often overlooked in the broader narratives of these global conflicts. Despite the substantial involvement of black troops in various capacities, historical accounts have frequently diminished their roles, suggesting that these soldiers saw limited frontline action. However, this portrayal does not accurately reflect the depth and breadth of the black contribution to the war efforts of the Western Allies. Despite their significant contributions, the recognition of black soldiers in these global conflicts has been muted in the post-war period. The reasons for this oversight are complex, including the colonial context in which these soldiers served, the racial prejudices of the time, and the subsequent focus on European and American narratives in the historiography of the world wars. In this video, we will delve into the role of black troops from the continent of Africa and those from the Americas in the war effort of the Allies. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. From the very beginning of the United States, African Americans have played crucial roles in the military, fighting for the country, and at the same time, striving for racial equality. Their participation in wars, from the Civil War, aimed at abolishing slavery, to fighting against fascism in World War II, while also challenging racial segregation at home, highlights their conflicting battle for freedom and rights. The segregation that plagued American society was also present in the military. African American soldiers were often separated from their white counterparts, living, eating, and spending their leisure time in different facilities. Even in serving their country, they faced discrimination, with the Red Cross going as far as to segregate blood supplies meant for transfusion. Interestingly, an African American doctor, Charles Richard Drew, developed improved techniques for blood storage and applied his expert knowledge in developing large-scale blood banks early in World War II. This medical advancement would save the lives of uncountable soldiers. Leadership roles within these segregated units frequently went to white officers, particularly from the South, who upheld the segregation policies. The tasks assigned to African American troops were often the most physically demanding and least prestigious, keeping them away from the front lines and in support roles, such as logistics and construction. These roles were vital to military operations, but were seen as reinforcing the notion of African Americans being second-class citizens. In contrast, high-profile combat positions were generally reserved for white soldiers. In May 1943, the Allied victory over Axis powers in North Africa paved the way for further military campaigns in Sicily, Italy, and eventually the D-Day invasion of Normandy. African American soldiers played significant roles in these efforts. In Italy, notable groups like the Tuskegee Airmen and the 92nd Infantry Division made remarkable contributions with their combat achievements. Meanwhile, in France, the Red Ball Express, a renowned truck convoy system, and the 761st Tank Battalion earned widespread admiration for their expertise, calmness under pressure, and courage. African American troops also made critical contributions in the Pacific, the China-Burma-India theater, and the Middle East, helping secure victory against Japan. Knowledge check. Did you know this? During World War II, African American troops were a significant part of the US military efforts in Africa, serving in countries across the continent, including Algeria, Egypt, Liberia, Nigeria, and South Africa, among others. Notably, around 85,000 African Americans were stationed in North Africa, while a smaller number, less than 10,000, served in the so-called sub-Saharan African region. Despite the larger numbers in North Africa, those stationed in the lower half of Africa had more extensive interactions with local populations. In World War I, African soldiers were mobilized from British and French colonies alone, serving on various fronts across the world. These troops played crucial roles in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and particularly in the African campaigns themselves. The Tirailleurs Sénégalais, regiments composed mainly of West African soldiers serving in the French army, are a prime example of the valiant efforts of African soldiers. They fought in the trenches of Europe, particularly in France, where they earned a reputation for their courage and resilience. French military policy towards recruiting Africans during the First World War changed when they realized this war of attrition was likely to last even longer without additional troops to fill the ranks. Senegalese battalions were trained during the peak of World War I. Over 72,000 African soldiers lost their lives during this period. The forced military conscription of Africans from present-day Mali and Burkina Faso resulted in a major anti-French uprising in 1915. The French colonial troops burnt down over 100 towns during their attempt to curb the uprising. African troops were forced into military service in Europe and were in most cases at the front line, actively involved in trench warfare. The cold winter months took a heavy toll on their numbers, since they were essentially not used to the weather conditions. Similarly, during World War II, African troops were again called upon to contribute to the war effort. The British Empire mobilized soldiers from its African colonies, including Nigeria, Ghana, then the Gold Coast, Kenya, Uganda, and more. These soldiers fought bravely in the North African campaigns against the Axis forces, in Burma against the Japanese, and in Italy during the Allied invasions. The King's African Rifles, a regiment that recruited from British East and Central African territories, became one of the most decorated units for their service in these theaters of war. The period right after World War II was a time of significant change, with lasting impacts. Politically, the war weakened the strongholds of old colonial powers and changed the world's power dynamics. It brought about a shift in attitudes, challenging the notion of colonial rule and bringing ideas of equality and the right of nations to govern themselves to the forefront of global discussions. This era opened new doors for those living under colonial rule, encouraging them to challenge European control in Africa and beyond. People across colonized regions took advantage of this shift, advocating for their rights and the autonomy to make their own decisions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I would like to say a special thank you to all of our channel members, Nubian storytellers. Join our Discord and share your knowledge with like-minded people. Be proud of your African heritage. We have a great past and an even greater future.